Hi guys, and welcome back to another F4F launch stream, and I'm your host, Monmon. Today we are unveiling the latest addition to our Castlevania Symphony of the Night collection, Death. For those of you who are fans of the game, you'd remember meeting Death at the castle entrance on the first stage. But that was video game Death. Now you're going to meet Castlevania Symphony of the Night Death Resin Statue. Gosh, now would you look at that. Our team put Death on a turntable, so let's give it a spin first, shall we? Okay, let's get to it. Death's pose here is inspired by the scene when players as Alucard meets Death. Now he has a scythe across his shoulder held by his left hand, and his right arm is outstretched as in the game when he was pointing at Alucard. Now another thing to note is that in the game, Death is floating and is missing the bottom part of his skeleton body. So with this Death Resin statue, it is his cloak that is holding him up. So the inside of his cloak right here is hollow. See? Now let's get to the details. Let's start with his cloak. Now as mentioned, it's meant to be hollow, so as to represent Death floating as he was in the game. So our team designed the sculpt to imitate the flowiness that the cloak had in the game since Death is floating. Now they've also sculpted in the natural creases that you would see on real fabric, as well as the slightly frayed edges to make the cloak look even older. Now the sleeves are also large, and by the way that they've been sculpted, it also perfectly imitates the look of the fabric draping on Death's arm. Now the texture, as you can see, is really defined, and the pattern that our team chose is similar to the texture of canvas. And Death's hood is sculpted to look like a separate piece that Death has to wear. Now almost like a collar with a hood. Now the trim of his cloak and the shoulder flaps have a black and white checkered pattern, and it perfectly ties in with the inside of his collar, which also has a large black and white checkered pattern. Now the black and white colors are meant to look more rustic so as to match the aged look that Death has. I mean, he is literally a skeleton. You can't look more aged than that. Now the overall blue color used for the cloak is a darker shade of a cyan blue. Now the way that the paint sinks into the texture really helps to emphasize the natural creases and helps to elevate its realism. Now the inside of the cloak has been painted black in order to further emphasize the hollowness of it. Now the same thing goes for the insides of the sleeves as well. Now let's move on to his skull. Death is sporting a white bandana with a knot on the side. Now the bandana has been painted to look white but aged, hence the slightly darker shade in the creases and a hint of yellow on the edges. Now his skull is very detailed, as our team followed human anatomy to ensure accuracy. Now the sculpt itself is very defined, which means Death here has some killer cheekbones, pun intended, and of course defined nostrils, teeth, and jawline. Just take a look at those indents right above his teeth. Now in particular, you can also see that the edges of the teeth have been painted with a darker shade to make them look even more aged and realistic. Now there are also scratches on the skull that help to represent a weathered look. However, his eye sockets do not follow human anatomy. Our team sculpted the brow bones to create a malevolent expression. And this is a perfect time to bring your attention to his eyes and the nostrils in particular. During the development process, we originally painted them insides in the darkest matte black paint we typically use. But as there is a certain shallowness to the eye sockets and nostrils, the light would still be slightly reflected, which is something that wasn't ideal. So instead, we tested out a new technique, which was the use of a super dark pigment paint, which really reduces any light reflection. Now the challenge with super dark pigment paint is that it can easily rub off, which is why we didn't add it to the inside of the cloak. Now, however, for the eyes and nostrils, it is perfect, as you won't be able to accidentally touch it or rub it off. Now the final effect, I'm sure you'll agree, makes the nostrils and the eye sockets look bottomless, which really ups the scariness. Now the overall skull was painted with a bone color as the base, and on top, our team added a layer of a darker shade, which really helps to emphasize those weathered textures, as well as presenting more definition. The same paint technique is used for all of Death's skeletal parts, which includes his neck, ribcage, spine, arms, and hands, all of which are of course sculpted to be anatomically correct. Let's take a closer look at the hands. Now the joints are defined by a darker shade, and the same technique was applied to the spine and neck, which of course helps to emphasize those vertebrae. Now the ribcage is not segmented, but has the same color and weathered texture as the rest of Death's skeletal features. Now I would say what's fun about his ribcage design are the maggots that look like they are pouring out from within. Now they are sculpted to look like they have filled up his ribcage. And having a few of them on top of the ribs, as well as how the maggots also travel slightly below the ribcage, further reinforces the image that these maggots are writhing and wriggling, which I can tell you right now was not fun for me to zoom into. But hey, what's great about our team? Realism. And to further that effect, we've painted the maggots with a color that imitates real maggots. And in between the maggots are a dark, muddy color to make them look dirty and, frankly, gross. But that just adds to the overall aesthetic of Death. Now let's talk about his Scythe, which is of course an iconic feature of Death that will be included in both the standard and exclusive editions. Now the blade and the handle has been painted with a dark silver that has a sheen that helps to imitate real metal. Now the blade itself is sculpted to imitate the look of having the back as well as the edge of a blade. So the way that the light bounces off the metallic paint helps to visually differentiate the two parts. Now on the blade as well as the handle, you can see scratches to imitate the look of usage. Now the part of the handle the blade is connected to also has two round-shaped nuts with rivets on it. Those are of course sculpted to look three-dimensional. Lastly, there is an embellishment at the top of the handle, which has been sculpted to have scratches as well as some dents to show just how much Death has used it. And it has been painted with a distinct gold that really makes it look weathered. Now the Scythe is an essential detail that Death needs to have, and it looks great, so I got one too! Now let's talk about the base. The inspiration was drawn again from the scene where players first meet Death in the game. Now there were parts of Dracula's castle which you could see in the game, and our team designed the base to emulate just how the castle looks in a more realistic setting. Now the base shape is a circle, and the top has some scratches and cracks to replicate a more weathered look. Now the trim of the top of the base is very castle-like, and below it, our team has added bricks in an upside-down stair-like manner. Now personally, I enjoy it because it makes carrying the base a lot easier since there's room for your fingers. Now the bricks have been painted with varying shades of warm gray, which I didn't know even existed, but it does. And it looks great here. Now the varying shades help bring dimension and depth to the bricks. It's a really nice replication of the castle that we see in the video game. Now it's a simple canvas that helps to place all the focus on Death, which is great for our standard edition. For our exclusive edition though, our team has added extra features to both Death and the base. So before I show you, let's watch a recap of all the details in the standard edition first. Roll the clip! And here he is, the exclusive edition of Death Resin Statue. So for this edition, the same realistic skeletal feature is also present, as we've included the small skeleton with wings as seen in the official artwork of Death. This little guy here is sporting the same white bandana that Death is wearing. He's got both hands on Death's shoulders, and he has a pair of wings, and is also missing the lower half just like Death. This time you can actually see the back of the spine, which has been realistically sculpted and colored with the same technique used for Death's skeletal features. Now you can see how the dark shades have perfectly replicated this dirty, weathered look, and the difference would be in his expression. Now here, his eyebrows have been sculpted to look slightly more upturned, which gives a less malevolent expression than Death. And his mouth is closed with dents above each tooth to imitate the look of real skulls. And of course, his eyes and nostrils have also been treated with the same super dark pigment paint to give that bottomless depth impression. Now maggots are also present in his ribcage for the same reason, and yes, zooming into this one was tough. I told my project managers that it was way too real and that it was really giving me a hard time, but hey, that's to our team's credit, right? They just made them look really real. Another feature that's beautifully detailed are his wings. The wings are meant to be a part of him, which is why you can see the feathers are attached to these two bones that connect to his shoulder blades. Now, the bones here have been painted to look distinct from the rest of his skeletal features. And the feathers on these wings are impressively detailed. You can actually see that the feathers are sculpted to look layered and each feather looks distinct. Now, the details on the feathers imitate how real feathers behave, as in the way that they would fray, separate, or even bend. Now, the color used was a darker gray, which really ties in with the color scheme of the rest of the statue. The extra skeleton on his shoulder is a beautiful feature that's going to be included only in our exclusive edition. And in addition to that, our team also included these spears in the base, which are placed in a manner that surrounds Death. First off, there are 5 in total, 2 in the front, 2 on the sides, and 1 at the back. Now the spears beckon to the impaled victims we see when we first meet Death in the game. Our team chose to use an alloy material, so the spears here are actually made of real metal. Now there are scratches on each spear that are distinct from one another to emulate the look of spears that were used to, like add in pale sound effects somewhere here. Now the spearhead has also been designed to look like a separate piece that's attached to the handle, so it's more three-dimensional. Now these spears are colored with a slightly darker silver than Death's Scythe. And on top of that, our team also added hints of this rust color to represent the weathered quality of the spears. Now I really like how the light bounces off the spearhead and it really emphasizes the structure of it. Now, let's put the standard and exclusive editions of Death side by side. The standard edition here puts all the focus on Death, and he looks like a menacing force to reckon with. In contrast, with more features added, our exclusive edition of Death presents memorable bits from when players first meet Death at the castle entrance. So, for those of you who want Death to be the only focus, the standard is a great option for you. And for those of you who want to display Death as well as features from the video game, the exclusive edition would be a great option for you as well. Now the details in both editions are insanely good and consistent. So why don't we now watch a recap of all the features in the exclusive edition of Death Resin Statue. Roll the clip! And we are back and joined by the rest of our Castlevania Symphony of the Night lineup. We have the exclusive edition of Alucard, Dracula, as well as Death. So for those of you who own either Dracula or Alucard, or you own both, you can now see how Death would look side by side to them. It's awesome to see characters from this beloved video game come to life. And with that, let's move on to pricing. For the standard edition, the price is as follows and will be available for pre-order on our website first4figures.com and at your local retailer. For the exclusive edition, the price is as follows and is available for pre-order only on our website first4figures.com. This edition will include Death's companion on his shoulder and a more detailed base. So, to recap, these are the prices for all editions. All prices indicated here exclude local taxes and shipping. So for example, the EU, UK, and Australia regions, prices will look different on our website, as they are already inclusive of sales tax. We are running an early bird offer till this day, so be sure to place your orders quickly within that time frame to take advantage of this limited time offer. For our website's pre-orders, we offer payment plans with extra fees for those who wish to purchase in installments. We also have warehouses in the following locations, which means no import fees for these regions. Shipping costs to your country are estimated at checkout time. The final cost will be shown on the invoice, which will be sent to your registered email when your order is ready to ship. Thank you for joining us for our Castlevania Symphony of the Night Death Resin Statue launch stream. Check us out on our website, first4figures.com, for more details, and follow us on our social media channels so you don't miss out on future news and teasers. We also have an amazing community on Facebook called the First 4 Figures Official Collectors Club, where we chat with our members, run polls, post behind-the-scenes content, giveaways, and much more. So don't forget to check us out. Lastly, pre-orders are now open. Links are in the description. And that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us today. F4F is love, F4F is life, and we shall see you in the next one. Bye!